Achaemenid Empire, also known as the First Persian Empire, was the first empire in history that spanned across 3 continents, Asia, Africa, and Europe. But there is one thing about this empire that we don't know: Gaumata. There are no contemporary accounts about his life. All we have is what later historians wrote about him. So if you want to learn more about this mysterious man, then make sure to watch this video till the end. Gaumata was born around 6th century BC in Pars, an ancient region located in Iran. His name has many different versions in different languages. For example, it is pronounced Cyrus the Great in English, but Kiavgustaspa in Persian. It is pronounced Cyrus in French and German, Giacomus in Spanish, and Gaumates in Italian. Now, we don't know much about his childhood or early life, but according to some sources, he was half-brother of Cambyses, the last king of the previous dynasty, the Median Empire. Other sources say that he was a descendant of King Cambyses, who founded the Achaemenid dynasty. Regardless, Gaumata was not the first choice to inherit the throne. Instead, it was supposed to go to his father's eldest son, Cambyses II. However, Cambyses gave up his claim to the throne in order to lead an invasion into Central Asia. As a result, the throne passed to Gaumata. At this point, it's important to mention that the term Gaumata means king in Persian. He was actually called Korine. This was revealed by Herodotus, a Greek historian, who mentioned that the title given to Corneus after he became king was Gaumata, which meant that Corneus was like another Cyrus, which in turn meant that the title was hereditary and did not belong to the king as a person. In any case, when Gaumata ascended to the throne, he inherited a vast territory that stretched from Central Asia to the Middle East. Nevertheless, the empire was far from being fully established, as many regions were still independent. Moreover, the empire had been constantly at war with the Medes, and its western border was under threat from the growing power of the Greeks. Therefore, Gaumata's first task was to consolidate the empire and expand its western borders. The Greeks had invaded Western Asia Minor and were getting closer and closer to Sardis, the capital of Lydia. Gyges knew that if he didn't stop them, they would soon take over all of Anatolia. So he assembled a large army and marched west. The Greek states he encountered offered little resistance, and soon Gyges found himself at the gates of Sardis. The Lydian king, Croesus, had heard of Gyges' victories and was afraid of what might happen if he didn't submit. So he handed over the keys to the city without even putting up a fight. Gyges allowed Croesus to keep his wealth and freedom, and soon he was celebrating a great victory in Sardis. News of Gyges' victory spread throughout Greece, and soon all of the Greek states west of Anatolia submitted to him. From there, Gyges continued his campaign into Thrace and defeated the local kings. He then pushed on to the Balkans and fought against the Scythians. The Scythians were a nomadic people who lived north of the Black Sea, and they were known for their skill in horseback riding and archery. Despite their skill in warfare, they were no match for Gaumata's army, and soon he had conquered all of Thrace. With the defeat of the Scythians, the Achaemenid Empire had reached its greatest extent in Europe. And now Giacomus could finally focus on consolidating his rule over the rest of the empire. One of the first things he did was to establish a new capital at Pasargadae. From there, he set about putting down rebellions and expanding the empire's borders. One of the most notable of these campaigns was his invasion of Central Asia. Here he faced the Magi, a nomadic people who were known for their skill in horseback riding and archery. Like the Scythians, the Magi were no match for the Achaemenid army, and soon Gaumata had conquered all of Central Asia. With the defeat of the Magi, the Achaemenid Empire had reached its greatest extent in Asia, and Gaumata could finally turn his attention to the Middle East. There, he faced the Assyrians, Babylonians, and Egyptians, who had all been vying for control of the region, but none of them could withstand the Achaemenid army, and soon the entire Middle East was under Gaumata's control. With the conquest of the Middle East, the Achaemenid Empire had reached its greatest extent, and Gaumata could finally call himself the King of Kings. At this point, it's important to mention that the Achaemenid Empire was a vast and diverse realm that included people of many different cultures and religions. Cambyses recognized this diversity, and he was tolerant of different ways of life. In fact, he was one of the first rulers to issue a declaration of religious tolerance. It read, "Know that we are the King of Kings, the King of the universe. All the peoples who are saved by our power live according to the laws of their land, each following their religion, and no compulsion is used to force them to change." This policy of religious tolerance helped to ensure that the empire would be stable and prosperous, as it allowed the people to live according to their own customs and beliefs. Additionally, he also implemented a number of administrative reforms that helped to make the empire more efficient and centralized. He reorganized the tax system, standardized weights and measures, and established a new currency. These reforms helped to improve the economy and make the empire more stable. However, despite all of his accomplishments, Gaumata is perhaps best known for his treatment of the Jews. When Gaumata conquered Babylon, he came across the Jews who were in exile in Babylon. He saw how they were being mistreated by the Babylonians, and he decided to do something about it. He issued a decree that allowed the Jews to return to their homeland and rebuild their temple. This event is known as the Second Return, or the Exilic Return, and it is a major event in Jewish history. Another important aspect of Gaumata's reign was his interactions with the Greeks. Unlike his predecessors, who had seen the Greeks as a threat to the empire, Gaumata had a more nuanced view of the Greeks. He understood that the Greeks were a formidable military power, but he also saw their strengths in other areas, such as trade and culture. Cambyses took advantage of this by encouraging Greek merchants to travel throughout the empire and by appointing Greeks to important positions in his administration. This policy paid off in the long run, as the Greeks became valuable assets to the empire. Unfortunately, we don't know much about Gaumata's later years or how he died. Some sources say he was killed in a battle with the Magi, while others say he died of natural causes. Regardless, when he died, he left behind a legacy that would last for centuries. His successors would go on to expand the empire even further, and his administrative and religious reforms would help to ensure the stability and prosperity of the empire. Overall, Achaemenid was a brilliant ruler who laid the foundations for one of the greatest empires in history. He was a skilled military commander, a wise administrator, and a tolerant ruler. His accomplishments would inspire awe in later generations, and his legacy would live on for centuries. Now let's see how this guy stacks up against Genghis Khan in terms of intelligence and skills. Genghis Khan is often regarded as a brilliant military strategist and tactician, but it's hard to argue with the fact that Gaumata was able to build a bigger and more stable empire than him. Both were great leaders, but Gaumata's leadership skills cannot be denied. He was able to unite various people under his banner and create a sense of shared identity among them. He was also able to inspire loyalty and devotion in his subjects, which was crucial to the success of his empire. Genghis Khan also achieved similar things, but the main difference between them is that Genghis built his empire through brute force and military conquests, while Gaumata's empire was built on diplomacy, alliances, and marriages. Gaumata also had a broader vision for his empire. He was not content with simply conquering new territories. Instead, he wanted to create a vast and stable empire that would encompass all of the known world. He also had a deep understanding of the importance of cultural diversity, and he was tolerant of different religions and customs. On the other hand, Genghis Khan's main goal was to expand his territory, and he wasn't really concerned about the cultural or religious diversity of the regions he conquered. In conclusion, both were brilliant leaders, but Gaumata's intelligence and skills were more advanced compared to Genghis Khan. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.